Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Baby Smooth, and today I have a special treat. We have a tier list of every single Backpack Battles item. Missing one or two, but we'll get to that later. And we're going to rank them, and I'll tell you a little bit about how each of those builds will work and how to make this item work for you the best. Now, these are the weapons, they're not any of the goobs or the other things. That'll be for a separate video. My credentials are I'm a Masters player, and I've played a lot. I've played probably over 100 hours. I'm addicted to the game. Let's get into it. So first off, we've got the Broom. I feel like the Broom is a key component for a few builds. We are ranking things from S to A to B to C to D to E, and I've put just a little fun phrase after it. If I had to rate a Broom, I would probably put it in B tier. B probably should represent Broom because I feel like you're gonna get this item if you play a magic staff, if you play a shovel build. This is a good item. It's solid. It does what it's supposed to do. It's a B tier weapon. Next up is a shovel. I feel like this is a B plus. I feel like maybe it's even an A. You know what? It is an A. The fact that you can use economy and still have a weapon is insane. It can inflict blind. It's still a very powerful weapon. I would put this in A tier because it's a staple and it will win you those early game rounds. You will have to transition out of it eventually, but you would not be surprised if you saw shovels in late game builds centered around inflicting blinds and stuff like that. Shovel is an A tier item for sure. Maybe even S, but we're gonna save S for the really strong. Hammer, I want to put it in the chaos section. This item is chaotic. Either this works for you really well, or it does not work at all. When the hammer works, it works. It's insane. When it doesn't work, you just lose, and then you lose all your points. For this reason, I feel like putting the hammer in the C tier because it's either gonna work or it's not. It could honestly be in the B. I don't know. You need a ton of daggers. You really need a ton of daggers for this to work out. Anyway, let's get to the reliable weapons here. We've got our first S tier weapon, the Bloodthorn. This weapon is insane. It will carry your games, and I think I have to make a new category just for this. We are adding a row above. This is gonna be the super duper tier here. If you get the Saber, you're probably winning. I'm sorry, if you get the Bloodthorn, you're probably winning the game. Maybe a little bit. It's very good. There's so many builds that use it, mostly on Ranger right now with crit Bloodthorns, and you're going to see a lot of these in your games, especially as you rank up. Next, we have, I'm going to add GG you win tier. GG you win if you get the item. You will need to build a little rejuve, a little bit of thorns around it. And when you run into rippers, you're going to be a little bit sad, but that doesn't change the fact that this weapon's incredible. And if you build a pineapple or two, you will probably be okay against that ripper. You will probably still scale with your Bloodthorn. Next up, we have the Saber. There's a reason S is Saber tier. This thing is still insanely good. I almost want to put this in GG you win tier. There's two builds that optimize this and use it very well. One of them is a Hex Blade Necromancer, and the other is the Arrow Crit Ranger. Don't be surprised when you instantly die when you pull up to a Ranger and they've got 2 or 3 of these and just smacking your face in. Now, the other build that makes use of this is that Hex Blade Necromancer, and if you are a Hex Blade Necromancer, you will also want the Dark Saber. That's the Saber combined with that Corrupted Potion. And I'm putting this in GG you win tier because if you have that Hex Blade, if you have another lightsaber, and you have a Poison Goob, you're probably going to do pretty good. You know what? It's not good enough. It's going to be the highest S. The Dark Saber will be the highest S. It's a very strong build, but it's not the GG you win build. You will absolutely climb if you're building Dark Saber, Hexblade, and Lightsaber, and you build around those items. That's my main build. That's how I hit Masters, just forcing that every game. But it cannot be said to be as good as the Bloodthorn crit build. Next up, we have this green, I don't even remember the name. I think it's Blood Harvester. It's a green weapon, and it's the worst one by far. It's that Blood Scythe, and it's so bad. It's absolutely unplayable. Never build this item in the current patch. Elaborate why you would ever build this item. That's why it's going in E tier. Not much else to say about it. It's too expensive. It's awkward to use. I don't think it'll ever be good. Next up, I mean, it might be good in further patches. It will never be good in the current patch. Next up, we have the Scythe. This is a broken item inherently. Very inherently broken. If you have poisons next to this, especially if they're the disgusting upgraded poisons, you GG win. There is nothing that's more powerful than this poison build right now. For that reason, I am putting it above even the Bloodthorn in the GG you win category. That is the highest any weapon will be on this list, I imagine. Maybe. But we'll get to that. Next up, we have a Magic Staff. I'm putting this in A tier, maybe. It builds into two very powerful things, the Crit Staff and the Unholy Staff, the Staff of Unhealing, sorry. But it can do work on its own. If you build around it, if you have a lot of magic, it can dominate the mid-game before people are getting their finished weapons, before they're getting their legendary weapons, their godly weapons. The Magic Staff can pop off and carry. It can stay in A tier. Next up, we have the Critwood Staff. I don't exactly believe in this item. Some of you might, but I don't think it's that great. Now, the exception would be putting a Critwood Staff in a lightsaber build to ensure that you have both all of the rejuve that you need for lightsaber, assuming you're going the mana generating item, the regen generating item, instead of the arrow. This could be a very powerful addition to that build. I'm going to put it in B tier. You don't really see this weapon in higher end runs and in high level play. I could be wrong about this. My knowledge of Ranger is a little bit less than my knowledge of Necromancer, but I don't see this as much. Don't forget, I'm still playing against Rangers in my games, so I know what works for them generally, to a little bit of a lesser extent. Next up is the Staff of Unhealing, the most nerfed item in the game, and the most deservedly nerfed item in the game. It's still S tier. It's still disgustingly strong when you build health pots for it. When you build that blood goob, you get 2 blood goobs. You get the thirsty mana blade, the mana thirst. This item is insane, and it still is. It keeps getting nerfed. It still needs a nerf. I think it used to be the most broken item in the game, but now it's just S tier. Still very, very purchasable. Although, in the games that I try to buy this, I swear I lose. When I try to play Vamp Healing, Unhealing, Staff, Necromancer, I lose. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I do wrong. Anyway, next we got the Ripsaw. Ripsaw probably has to go in S tier. You know, its value, it can find its way into any build, especially in a Thorn-dominated meta. Now, last patch we saw a lot of Thorns. We're probably going to see a lot of Thorns still, especially with Bloodthorn being in the GG you win category. You're going to see a lot of Ripsaws as well. The value of it as a weapon for 10 gold, you can fit it in a lot of builds. It's always going to be S tier for now. This is one of the most versatile weapons in the game, and it will do well against a lot of builds. You will basically stop builds from doing what they're intended to do. If there's a lightsaber build, you can steal its regen. If there's a Thorns build, you can steal that. If there's a Vamp build, you can stop it from getting that Vamp from that regen. It's very useful, very versatile. Next, we have a Hex Blade. So I believe this is the only class item on this list because none of the other ones are weapons. And Hex Blade is actually really good. If you play the Saber builds with Hex Blade, you're going to have a good time. Even if the Hex Blade finds its way into a hammer build, you're still going to have a really good time. This is like, you know, it's in S. I don't know where I would put it comparatively. It'd be weird to put it above Ripsaw. It's just going to stay in S. Hexblade is a great build. You will climb if you play it properly. I'll be putting out a Hexblade guide soon enough. In the next few days, probably, so like and subscribe for that if you'd like to see that. It will help you climb. It will hit you masters if you play decent. And it's not hard to play around. I think it's the easiest build I've ever played. Next up, we have mana daggers. This item is also chaotic, much like the hammer. Do you have mana? Will you use mana? If so, it's an S tier item. It could even be a GG you win item. It's a little broken if you build for it. I feel like a lot of these items fall into that category. Now, if you're not built for it, it's probably just in the A tier. But if you are built for it, it's in the S tier, probably high S. For that reason, we're going to put it in the low S because it's hard to know when you're going to be able to use it. And you need a few of them. If you have a mana dagger, it can fit into your build. If you have a lot of excess mana, it can be hard to pull off to know that you need to keep a dagger, to keep a mana orb. But if you come across it and you just have it working, it's pretty good. Next up, we have the poison dagger. Now, before this last patch, poison dagger could have been A or B. But now that the epic poison potions exist, there's a lot less reason to make this dagger, I think. You could call me wrong, especially since I play a Hex Blade build, a build that does more damage when you inflict debuffs. But I'm going to put this in like C tier. I don't see too much reason to play this outside of having a hammer, and even then, if you have a hammer, you would want either the vamp dagger or the mana dagger instead. This might just be dingus tier. I am putting the poison dagger in dingus tier. Feel free to cuss me out in the comments below. You're a dingus if you like this item. Next up, we have the vampire dagger. This item, obviously, it does pretty well if you have a bunch of other vamp items. The chances that you create this are pretty low. I'm also putting this in dingus tier because when you have that vamp gem, you would much rather have vamp gloves or vampire goop. Those items are way better than this item. Unless you're running a hammer build once again. But even if you are, you'd still probably want the vamp gloves. Maybe. So we're putting this in the D tier for dingus. Now, we get to something very chunky. A very big boy. Look at this lad. This big old chunk. Where do you think this guy goes? He goes in GG you win tier. The only kicker is you have to buy cards to be able to get him. I don't know that you're going to be able to do that. To ruin so many rolls, to ruin so many slots, to get this guy. Good luck. That's all I'm going to say. Good luck. You need a very stable base build if you're going to pull off the big chungus. But you could force build him if you're lucky enough to get the big chungus card. I am not lucky. But it's okay. If you're building around it, if you build a bunch of lovers card, lovers can carry you early enough. And then maybe you can get lucky and get the big chungus. Maybe. When you do get it, it's incredible. The damage for no stamina cost, insane. The buff, the speed buff, crazy. This card goes hard. Next, we have the dragon. This is an item you only get if you're ahead or if you're trying to just sack a few rounds. The 2 rounds that it takes to hatch. Good luck winning those. Unless you purchase this on sale and you're already pretty strong, you're going to lose 1 or 2 rounds buying this. But once it hatches, you can put it in literally any build because it costs no stamina, just like its bigger brother. No stamina cost, tons of damage, a little bit of fire buff. It's a good card. It's a good thing to purchase. Next, we have the Falcon. The Falcon, you know, S tier is getting really populated here. Maybe I should consider moving things to A, but at least we have GG you win tier above S. The Falcon used to be S++, GG you win. You would play with carrot goobs and you would just win the game. Falcon now is realistically high A tier. I could get cussed out for this one. Maybe it should be S, but you see it a lot less. It's kind of a pain to build. So sometimes the people that are building this are dead before you even see it. I'm going to leave it in high A. Maybe it could be S. Next up, we have the Great Sword. The very big boy Great Sword. Now this sword, you would see it a lot in the Thorns patch. You're starting to see it quite a bit with bows making a huge comeback as well. plus 4 damage is nothing to shake your head at, but by the late game, you're often going to sell it. I'm contemplating B tier for this, maybe A tier. It's hard. It's a hard sell. I'm going to go with the highest B tier. Once again, this is a ranger only item. Just kidding, it's not, but you really will see it on rangers only. It doesn't really have a place on most necromancer builds. So I'm a little bit less familiar with it, but let's go off of what I see winning. You will never see this item in the late game. It will either be sold or potentially a crossblade. Next up, we have the Greater Hero Sword. This weapon goes pretty hard. If you're ever going against the early game, good luck. If you see this turn 2, give up, you're probably dead. If you see this turn 7, you win. Congratulations. This is the type of weapon that you either upgrade it or sell it. It's going to go in B tier. It's a solid staple, but it'll go right next to the Broom as a solid staple that can be upgraded into some decent stuff like the Falcon or the Greater Greatsword. Next up, we have the Hungering Blade. The Hungering Blade, once again, a solid staple. Finds its way into many endgame builds, many high-level endgame builds. For that reason, it has to go into S. It is the building block for both Bloodthorn and the Mana Thirst. As long as you have a little bit of regen from those healing herbs, you will be carried in the early rounds. If you get this like round 3 on sale, congratulations, you just won every single game for the next 3 matches. If you ever get this like round 4, good job, you're getting free wins. It is a great weapon. It has low stamina cost. It has high speed. It can activate goobs very well. This is a great, great, great weapon. For that reason, it's definitely going above even the Hex Blade. It's going even above the Ripsaw, even though the Ripsaw counters it. Next up, the Greatsword. The biggest boy. The Cloud Strife Buster. Good luck building this, but if you pull it off, well done. Clap it up for you. I hope this item never becomes meta. I hope people don't realize that this is a sleeper OP item. This is absolutely the most sleeper broken item in the game. You can crit for 100s without even boosting your damage at all. When people figure out how to use this weapon, the meta is going to be toxic. Now, I'm sure there's counters. I'm sure you've got the book. You've got a bunch of other things, armor, tons of armor. Shields, maybe, to reduce its stamina, but once you see a greatsword that's working, it does working. I am putting it in B. You know what? I'm putting it in C. With the hammer can be absolutely broken with the right circumstances. So too can the greatsword. It will go underneath the hammer in C tier. It needs time to cook. These weapons, they can cook if you let them cook. But thankfully for now, they don't cook. Next up, we have the Mana Thirst. On its own, this is a dingus tier weapon. In 1 or 2 builds, it becomes an S tier weapon. In the Unhealing Staff build, you will often see 2 of these linking up to 2 vampire goobs. And if you see that, congratulations, you've lost the game. For this reason, it is going in S tier because it has a place in an endgame build that was the strongest for last patch. Not that last patch matters, but it's still one of the strongest in this patch, and it's necessary for that Unhealing Staff build. It is a decent item for mana generation, probably the best to generate mana, aside from maybe just the mana crystal, but it's very reliable. You're not relying on chance at all. You are generating your mana, and that's good if you need it. This item belongs in S tier. There's so many things in S tier, but they're all based off of endgame builds, aside from maybe the Mana Dagger. You won't see that much, but if you do, you're dead. Crossblades. How many times have you lost to a Crossblades in a high-ranked match? Not many. For that reason, I'm putting it in C tier. I don't think this item is as good as it should be. This should be a GG you win item, because taking the time to build it using those resources is probably pretty tough, in my opinion. I haven't had a great time trying to build it, and I will always get kicked out when I do. I believe this belongs in C tier. I believe it could use a change. Once again, cuss me out if I'm wrong about this in the comments below. I'm putting it in the C tier. Next up, we have the Vine Whip. Now, this item actually goes pretty hard on its own. It also combines into the Bloodthorn, which is the strongest weapon in the game right now. I'm going to put this in high A tier because you do need some items to make it work. But if you're early enough in the game, this item will solo carry. It has a disgustingly awkward shape that you have to play around. A little bit annoying to make use of it, but if you can find that spot in your backpack for it, and you need a solo weapon, if you've just been unlucky, you don't have any good weapons, and you absolutely need a win, Vine Whip will do it for you, the Thorn Whip. Next up, we have the classic Dagger. We're just going to put this in B tier. It's what you'd expect. It's middle of the pack. It does build into some nice things like the Mana Dagger, and it builds into some dingus things like the Poison and the Blood Dagger, the Vampire Dagger. I'm going to go ahead and put it in B tier. You can make use of it. You're not going to see it that commonly on its own. It could use a hammer, but you're not going to see the dagger popping off or going crazy. Next up is the Pan. I don't know if you know this, but the Pan is literally the strongest item in the early game. It's going in GG you win tier, and I'm not trolling. I'm serious. You will win matches by buying a pan and putting fruits and vegetables around it, some mushrooms too. You will win that match. If you are starting at round 1, round 2, even round 3, Pan will solo carry into the mid game with just some fruit and vegetables around it. It's that simple. The Pan has always dominated early game, and it always will. It's really that simple. GG, you win. You have the Pan. You have some fruits and vegetables around it. GG, you win. You've done it. Next up, the Pandemonium. Now, previously, this weapon was okay. Right now, this weapon is insanely strong. I'm putting it also in GG, you win. This weapon absolutely carries you. This is the Pan's older brother, and it goes insanely hard. It's stupid. Poison builds are on top right now. You will lose to poison builds. In the mid game, you will lose to poison builds. Maybe into the late game, poison builds are insane. You will absolutely lose to poison builds if they have the Scythe, they have some potions, and they have the Pan. Good luck, you're dead already. The Pan, because you can work with the fruits and vegetables, Pandemonium is insane. And look at that cute little panda. This item is going crazy right now. It is one of the most powerful in this current patch. I'm going to put it above the Chonk because it's so much easier to make. But the Chonk's pretty cool, so he can stay above the normal Pan. Next up, Excalibur. This is the golden frying pan from the Ranger. You're going to create it with that stamina potion and a pan. This thing is kind of slept on right now. Once people realize that the Excalibur build is insane, we're going to have a very toxic meta because this item will keep you alive. I'm putting this in GG, you win. It's a sleeper item. I'm standing behind this. If you can get some carrots, some blueberries, some bananas, you're going to win with the Excalibur because the active effect allows you to use all of the fruits and vegetables around it as long as you have enough mana. People will chain that. If they have a mana crystal, they will basically just constantly be using every fruit and vegetable, and you will not have enough damage to take them out. Good luck winning against that. If this is used properly, it's absolutely insane. It just got a buff, and that buff leads to some very cool looking builds that will poop on you. They will absolutely destroy your life. This is a cool weapon. It is in GG, you win tier. The Villain Sword is by far the most broken weapon in the game. If bought early, you can build around it. You can get a bunch of daggers. You have free victories. If you don't buy it early, you can still get free victories. It's insane for the value. If you ever see this on sale, congratulations, you just won the game. This thing is goofy. It probably needs a nerf. It's so easy to use. There's so many different places to put things. It's so very good. So good, Villain Sword. Buy it probably every time unless you have a good reason not to. You need a pretty good reason not to. Next up, we've got the classic sword. Now, the hero sword is great if you have 2 of them and you have 2 whetstones. You will win that round. When you start round 1 and you see 2 hero swords, 2 whetstones, that's when you just go home. You pack it up. When you see this round 2, you still go home. You still pack it up. You're not beating that. For that reason, this is going to go high A. It builds into every sword. It does everything for you. I'm sorry, it goes low A. It's not... No, it goes high B. It's not great on its own. You need the whetstones for it, or else it's not going to do too much. As long as you have 2 of these and a whetstone, you will win that, like, first round. Solid starting item. More powerful than the broom. More powerful than the pan at level 1, but the pan has its own reason to be in GG you win. Because you still need 2 of these, and they get expensive. I don't know. Maybe it's A. Maybe it's high B. The pumpkin. This is hard to place. This one, I should totally get cussed out. Now, with pans being so good, if you see a pumpkin and you put it with an Excalibur, that's probably disgustingly powerful. A pumpkin with pandemonium? Probably okay. The pumpkin is going to go in S tier. It could find its way into a dagger build. It could find its way into a pan build. And those 2 builds are doing pretty good right now. Honestly, every build is playable in this game, right? The pumpkin's either in A or S. You have to build around it. So it'll go in S if you can build around it. It can be a little bit difficult to make it work. I feel like it's an A. I feel like it's an A, and I'm sorry. If anybody thinks it's S, forgive me. Kamenosai. Next up, we have the Wolverine gloves, the clawed gloves. These are pretty good. These kind of dominated last patch. I think they did not get nerfed. They might have even gotten buffed. Maybe they went untouched. We're going to go ahead and put these in high A tier. These claws can carry your early game. And that's pretty nice. I love early game winning. But then you get rid of your gloves. And gloves are really nice too. You don't want to get rid of your 4 gold item. You will sell these eventually, these claws. They don't have a place in your late game build. Unless you're some sicko who has like 3 of them with the arrow. Claws will go in high A for now. They can totally carry early game. But then they fall off pretty hard. But they're good value. You can get them on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. And you can win the next few from that. You will not get claws on turn 1 unless you're very lucky. But it could happen, and it does happen. Next up, we have the bow. Now, the bow, like most builds, like most things that build into other things on this tier list, is probably high B, maybe. But it's gonna go in S or A because it builds into a very lucky crit bow that's very powerful. The bow's early game keeps it out of S because it's not gonna win you the game by just having this and some other things. It doesn't truly shine unless you have a great setup for it. For that reason, I'm gonna put it in A tier. It is a good weapon, don't get me wrong, but you have to play around it. Some people can't figure out how to build it, but if you watch a guide on where to put bows, you'll probably do pretty well. The next item is the lucky bow. The bow combined with the clovers. I have half a mind to put this in GG you win tier. It is a very powerful item in my opinion. It is going to go into S tier. I'm moving that mana dagger to the end of S tier. I'm putting the bow behind the dragon. This bow, you still have to have another item that can activate it, that can do pretty well. It's not going to carry you on its own, but if you have 2 bows, you have 3 bows, you have 4 bows, GG you win. Probably. If you make a smart setup with a bunch of bows, you're going to do really nice. The next item is a spear. It's so tiny. Look, it's this is so small. The spear is an incredible item for the first 3 or 4 turns. If you ever see it on sale, congratulations, you've won in those first few turns. If it's not on sale, it's still solid. It will do work for you. It's going to go in A tier because after the early games, it's just not going to win. But in the early game, ever see this on sale, buy it immediately. Buy it immediately. Sell it around turn 6 or 7, maybe 5 even, before it falls off and you start to lose. Nobody really has defense in the early game. But by the late game, you are starting to see spears find their way into Arrow Ranger build to get rid of those nasty fatigue defense levels of the necromancers that are playing fatigue necro. Taking out a ton of defense with the spear is pretty cool. It's a niche item though. It really only has that niche. If you have the spear and they don't have defense, which a lot of builds don't, it is kind of wasted. So for that, we're going to put it in high A. Remember, if you get this early, you're going to win those early rounds. You can also see this in a late game Ranger build. We already did the crit wood, so we're going to leave that over there. Last item on this list is the Thorn Bow. The bow that you make from combining the Walrus Tusk with the bow. This item is absolute trash. It is so bad. It's unplayable. It did just get buffed. And maybe, just maybe, it'll carry you early. But you are wasting a bow, something that can turn into a beautiful late game weapon. For what? To win a round or two and then lose every single round after that? Never, never, ever, never, ever build this item. Elaborate why you would ever build this item. It's garbage. It does not transition into late game. You are just going to sell it 2 turns after you build it. Unless you get it like turn 3, maybe then you get some value out of it. It's going in E tier with the rest of the losers. Now this tier list is so hard to put my word behind because all of these items depend on different factors. And this is going to be a hard game to rank in terms of what's strong and what's not. But I stand by everything here. Looking at it, everything looks okay. The only thing maybe is crossblades, but I think everything in the cook tier can either pop off or die trying. But also, then maybe it should go in dingus anyway. I was going to move it up, but now I want to move it down. Anyway, this is this patch, this current patch. I don't know the patch number. I'm going to edit that in a second. So this was patch 0.6.3. I'm Baby Smooth, and you have a nice day. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. I am going to be making build guides to show you how to hit master's level, maybe even climb above that using these weapons. Each of them can find their way into a build at one point or another, except for these two. These two suck. And that's about it. Enjoy your day. I was going to say enjoy the video, but we just finished that. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. See you later.